Would someone like to move that? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Reese, any comments or questions? Board of vote?
Court of vote has been requested for the first item of council reporting out of closed session. Mayor Maracus, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Reese? Councillor Reese votes yes. Councillor Kim? Councillor Kim votes yes. Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson votes yes. Councillor Gartner? Councillor Gartner votes yes. Councillor Gallo? Councillor Gallo votes yes. And Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Gilliland votes yes. The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Second item?
Second item of council reporting out of closed session is to receive the report and that confidential direction to staff be confirmed.
Would someone like to move that? Councillor Gallo, Councillor Gilliland. Any comments, questions? Board of vote?
The court of vote has been requested for the second item of council reporting out of closed session. Councillor Thompson, how do you vote? Councillor Thompson votes yes. Councillor Gallo? Councillor Gallo votes yes. Mayor Maracus?
Yes.
Councillor Kim? Councillor Kim votes yes. Councillor Gartner? Councillor Gartner votes yes. Councillor Gilliland? Councillor Gilliland votes yes. And Councillor Weiss? Councillor Weiss votes yes. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Confirming bylaw. Someone like to move that, please? Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Gartner. All the vote, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We have a motion to adjourn. Councillor Gartner, Councillor Kim, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Yes, please. Mr. Clerk, time is 7:02. I'm going to call this special public planning meeting to order. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Churchina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas recognized through Treaty number 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Council, can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Kim, Councillor Gallo, any comments or questions? Call the vote. Councillor Gallo? Councillor Gallo, yes. That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Welcome to Aurora's special public planning meeting. The purpose of this public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input regarding the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. For the planning application that will be considered by council tonight, the following process will occur. 1, town planning staff will outline the purpose of the planning application being considered. 2, following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the item virtually or in person and may speak twice for up to 5 minutes each time. And 3, following comments from members of the public, I will then ask for council for their comments. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses of the individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any further council or committee meetings concerning the application being considered, you must complete a planning interested party and speaker request form available on the town's website at aurora.ca/planning notices, or contact Planning and Development Services by email at planning@aurora.ca, or you can complete a green interested party form. Linda is holding it up. So if you fill that out and leave that with her, we'll make sure you're notified. Under the Planning Act, only the applicant has the right to appeal any decision of council on a planning application to the Ontario Land Tribunal. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded. Names, addresses, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. This will help our town clerk prepare accurate minutes and create a record that is available to the general public, including the town's website. Questions about this collection should be directed to the town clerk, Town of Aurora. I will now ask the town clerk to confirm that notification to the public occurred as required under the Planning Act. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Respecting item 5.1, report number PDS 24-131, application for zoning bylaw amendment, Town of Aurora, 115 George Street, part of lots 1 and 2, registered plan 38, and the file number is ZBA-2024-07. A notice of public planning meeting was mailed to all addressed property owners within 120-meter radius of the subject lands, including all properties on Hawthorne Lane. It was as well as published in the local newspapers and posted on the town's website and posted to signage on the property on October 23rd, 2024. Public notification has been provided in accordance with the Planning Act.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I will now ask our Director of Planning and Development Services to begin with the presentation. Mr. Ramuno.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I turn it over to Antonio Greco, our senior planner, who will provide an overview of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Council and public probably aware this is a little unique situation in that the town, we're initiating the zoning amendment application for the George Street School property, which the town purchased back earlier on this year, April. So the intent of the public meeting, as the mayor mentioned, is to receive public input on the proposal, which is to we're looking at rezoning the frontage portion of the school site, which is currently zoned institutional, to a future residential use. But I'll turn it over to Antonio to provide some details with respect to the zoning amendment application and the process in general.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. Antonio.
Thank you, Marco. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and members of the public. My name is Antonio Greco, and I'm a senior planner with the town. Before us tonight is a statutory public planning meeting for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment at the property municipally known as 115 George Street. The subject property is municipally known as 115 George Street and is currently owned by the town of Aurora. The property is located on the east side of George Street, just northeast of the Kennedy Street West and George Street intersection. The property has an area of 1.61 hectares and contains 134.27 meters of frontage along George Street. The subject property currently contains the George Street Public School, which is permanently closed and anticipated to be demolished by the end of January 2025. The building demolition will be completed by the Town of Aurora Operations Department. Single detached residential uses can be found to the north, south, east, and west of the subject property. Furthermore, an OLT-approved townhouse development abuts the northeast end of the subject property at 45 Tyler Street. The Town of Aurora official plan designates the subject property as community services and facilities and environmental protection. The intent of the community services and facilities designation is to permit a broad range of community service uses. The intent of the environmental protection designation is to permit agricultural uses, conservation uses, public parks, and private parks. The subject property is currently zoned institutional and environmental protection EP zone within the Town of Aurora's zoning bylaw 6000-17 as amended. The institutional zone permits for a broad range of community services uses, including private and public schools, recreation center, place of worship, library, long-term care facility, and museum. The environmental protection zone permits for a wide range of agricultural uses, conservation uses, public parks, and private parks. The existing EP zone boundary found on the property today will remain unchanged as part of this proposed application. A conceptual site plan has been prepared by staff to demonstrate the potential development layout for the subject property. A conceptual site plan illustrates 7 61.5-foot lots fronting onto George Street. The proposed lots will also contain a depth between 211 feet to 214 feet. The subject lots will back onto the proposed open space block, which will serve as a public park containing access from the existing 3-meter town right-of-way located at the north end of the property. The Town of Aurora Parks Department will commence their community engagement process regarding the proposed park design in the later end of Q1 2025. The proposed ZBA seeks to rezone the subject property from institutional zone to detached third residential R3 zone and public open space O1 zone. As previously mentioned, the existing environmental protection zone boundary on the property will remain unchanged as part of this proposed application. The R3 zone will implement the as of right zoning permissions as stated in the zoning bylaw 6000-17. This zone strictly permits single detached dwellings. The O1 zone will implement the use of public parks, open spaces, and trails. Staff have identified the following matters to be addressed. Detailed review of the subject application to be undertaken to address all comments, including those received from this public planning meeting. Further evaluation of the various residential lotting options for the proposed development. All technical matters will be addressed through the site plan approval process. Next steps in the planning process. Receive council feedback and when appropriate, a staff report with recommendations will be presented at a future committee of the whole meeting for consideration. All interested parties will be notified of updates relating to the subject application, and any further planning applications will be subject to the approval of the land use amendments as presented tonight. Thank you, and staff will remain open for any questions.
Thank you, Antonio. I'll now open up the public portion of this meeting. First up, I have Brian Carpenter. Oh, you said you wanted to go first. So I can just get you to state your name and you have 5 minutes, sir.
It's Brian Carpenter. I live at 81 George Street. I've been living there for 43 years. The question I'd like to ask this council is I've heard that the houses is what I was expecting. Would I like to know what you're going to do with the traffic flow? I figured there'd be maybe 14 cars added to this area. And then with the new townhouses and the old tannery, George Street is very hard to get out onto Wellington. And that's one of my concerns is the more you build in that area, the more traffic goes up and down George Street and there's no buffer zone. So I'd just like to know what the town would like to do to prevent or help us get in and out of George Street onto Wellington. I asked about the houses. You've told us what about the houses. More green land, I'd like to see more trees. A lot of these guys cut these trees down when they build. I'd like to see more trees put into the property and that kind of stuff. And I'd like them to save that one maple tree that turned nice and red this fall. So right out in front. That's all I wanted to know is the traffic and the houses. Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, I have Garrett Tone. Garrett, is Garrett here? Going once, going twice. No Garrett. Susan Shaw. Susan, welcome. Susan, if I can just get you to state your name and you have 5 minutes, please.
My name is Susan Shaw. Sorry, what else did you want? Just my name?
Oh, just your name. And
Okay.
letting you know you had 5 minutes. Go ahead.
This neighborhood is near and dear to my heart because my husband and I bought our first house about a block away from the George Street School and Park in 1977. At that time, it was very affordable to buy a house on Temperance and Kennedy. And we lived there for quite a number of years, and our kids went to George Street School and played often in the park, primarily because it was the town's only outdoor swimming pool at the time, and also because of the playground at the school and the lovely toboggan hill. So it's meant a lot to our family to have been associated with that. When I looked at the map that was in the newspaper that I saw on the town website, it looked to me as if there was not going to be any public access coming off George Street into the park, and that the only public access would be off Reuben. But I heard you say there will be a town right of way for people to get into the park from George Street. Okay, thank you. My concern right now in Aurora is the lack of affordable housing. And I know this will probably set a lot of people off, but having read the the draft affordable housing plan, I think it's called, there is a dire need for affordable housing. And this seemed like a pretty good opportunity to implement some of the objectives of that plan, which I believe still has to be approved, but might be approved by December. The 6 lots, I don't know if they've been deemed to be affordable houses. You know, basic equipment in a house, it doesn't have to have marble and crystal and all the other things that go into a lot of condos and townhomes this point. But I would really like the town to consider putting in affordable housing. Maybe that means a four-part unit, what do you call them? 4 units, 4-plex units, something along that line. If I can ask a question during this 5 minutes, does the town have a definition of what?
Well, we don't go back and forth with questions,
Okay.
but you can ask a question and one of the counselors might ask it during
sorry.
their.
I'm just wondering if anybody has sort of designated this to be affordable. I've been to many planning meetings over the years where the developers say it will be affordable. And of course, it turns out to be anything but. And I think we need to put some dollar values on when we're talking about affordable in order to make sure it does get built. But I would urge council to reread the affordable housing plan and see if this would be a good fit to try to put something in, because it's desperately needed. We don't need more townhouses. We don't need more condos, and we don't need large homes. We need affordable housing. My husband and I are faced with having to leave Aurora after being here since 1977, because there are no small footprint or affordable homes for us to live in. We're going to have to move out to Georgetown or Orangeville or somewhere along those lines. And I think it's a shame that the town is not providing housing for first home buyers that's affordable so that our children could live in Aurora. They've all had to move out of town to find their first home. And also for older people that don't want to live in condos and 3-story townhomes or large homes. You're not providing for 2 sectors of your population. So I'd like to have you think more about building community with a variety of homes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Tom Hashem. Tom? Welcome. And just get you to state your name, and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Tom Hashem, 76 George Street in Aurora. Our family's been there for 61 years now. I heard the last speaker. I'm not sure how you can turn this into affordable housing without making condos here, which a lot of people would strongly object to, including myself. The layout of the location of the George Street Public School, I don't see how you can do anything affordable without it having been high density. I don't object at all to the idea of 7 homes being there. I think it's a good idea. I think it fits in with the neighborhood quite well. We are facing, as Brian said, a huge number of condo townhomes on Tyler Street, which will make traffic very difficult in that neighborhood. I would like to see maybe a set of full lights at the bottom of George Street. My biggest question here to council is, I'm totally fine with the projected 7 homes as shown on the map earlier. Does the town divide those 7 lots ahead of time and then sell them off individually to developers or a developer or multiple developers? Or does the town sell it as one large lot with the idea that, yes, this is our plan. We want 7 large, sorry, last speaker, but 7 large homes being built on those 7 lots. And that's our plan. And what is to prevent a single developer from saying, okay, I'll buy it. I'll plan for 7 homes. Oh, wait, we've changed our mind. We can make a great deal more money by putting 40 townhomes in here. So you'd object to it, town? Sorry, we're going to go to the OLT and we're going to say that we want high density here because that's what Doug Ford wants. That's my question. Can you divide it ahead of time and sell it to individual developers, or does it go as one big lot? And then how do you prevent a change of plan? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public? Yep, come on up. And then, yep. And just get you to state your name. You have 5 minutes, sir.
My name's Stephen Hunt. I'm a resident 7 Hawthorne Lane. Also in support of the lots that have been proposed, or encouraged by the fact that we're emulating the fabric of the neighborhood. I also think that there's more appropriate development sites for affordable housing. But the devil's in the details. And for us, we'd want to make sure that there's certain control measures within the development standards for the properties. I think the last question was a very good one, actually, on how one gets into a development agreement with a private development company and ensures that the plan before us is executed. I'm involved in infill developments in other jurisdictions, and there, as this council knows, ways to do that. Think matters of zoning. I'm not fully familiar with the R3 standards, but I'd be concerned about matters of front yard setbacks to ensure that they're compatible with those of the existing homes, and that they're not jutting forward, allowing room for mature trees to be planted, things that sort of add to the character of the neighborhood rather than subtract from it. So I think the zoning standards, and I think it was mentioned that the R3 as of right standards are what's being considered, but I'd be mostly concerned with the front yard setbacks. What else do we have here? Building form. Again, compatibility with the nature of development within the streets. Very nice homes being brought on, but things of garage sizes, proportionality to the size of the lot. We wouldn't want to have an infill development that perhaps stands out too much. I mean, you can see on the street, there's a lot of creativity, modern architecture versus traditional architecture all work well together, but it's the form and massing and feel of the home, the individual homes that make it work well. Again, not being familiar with the R3 standards, things of height, maximum height requirements, certainly a number of stories. You'll see that most of the development is grade related. Ground floors are within close proximity to adjacent ground, so they're not raised homes. They're not 3-story homes. They're 2-story homes. I think there should be a requirement for a tree planting program to bring to life that part of the street. I'm trying to remember the one tree that was mentioned, but as you know, with the apron for parallel parking, there isn't much in the way of trees on that site that we would see. So quality control in terms of how the project is executed, architectural control requirements, perhaps, to ensure that the quality of development and design is there. And a construction management program. I'm a runner in the area. I run early. There's lots of traffic, cut through traffic from Wellington through George to Kennedy and through. This problem will only be exacerbated by more development on the street, more on-street parking, which is to be expected. But how that all works in a normal day for the rest of us on Hawthorne, we're going through a little thing right now with upgrades on the electrical system. So we've been going through construction. So it's very dear to us right now how that gets managed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any other members of the public? Just if you want to just kind of come stand and line up, and that way we know you're going to speak for sure. That way. If I can just get you to state your name and you got 5 minutes.
Smith. I live at 25 Hawthorne Lane, right across from the property. I just wanted to thank council and the town for taking the initiative to purchase this property so we can have some control over the neighborhood and preserve some green space in the area. So thank you. Sometimes you guys don't get enough thank you. So there you go. I'm also a sucker for trees. So if we can make sure that we get as many trees in there on the boulevard in front of these houses so that we can maintain the mature neighborhood and feel, that would be great. It was mentioned the intersection at George and Wellington. I know we're not talking directly about that, but as somebody who turns left and right there on a regular basis, it's super dangerous because it actually narrows and you often have Enbridge trucks or somebody servicing the condo buildings on either side. So then it goes down to 1.5 lanes. So if the appropriate department could look at that, it is really dangerous. It's not just about traffic. It's about it funneling down and not having space to turn. A couple of questions on where the fence would be on the backyard of those houses. Will it be on top of the hill? Will it be on the bottom of the hill? And as far as we're talking about, I guess, the whole property, but as far as what goes into that park and the plans there, do I just fill out the green form so that I can be kept in the loop on what the next steps are for the park process? I will say my kids are older now, but if you do look compared to some of the Bayview communities, we don't have a park that's really close by. So I think having that park, having that green space, having the multi-use park as far as basketball, something for kids, I think is a real asset and mixed use park benefit, because we really don't have anything within a few blocks for the kids to do. So, and lighting, proper lighting. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, and just get you to state your name and you have 5 minutes.
Catherine DePlatte, and I'm a resident on Hillview Road. And again, thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today. My concern is also for the trees and the fabric of the neighborhood. We're, I'd say, one of the older neighborhoods in Aurora, and the tree canopy is something that I think most of us hold near and dear to our heart. Often we see with developers, people will come in and clear cut the whole lot and then go to develop. And I'm just here to make a request that, as earlier stated, we do have several beautiful trees actually on the front and also on the north and the south end of that property. So if there is any way of dividing those lots so that there's a buffer zone between that 3-meter right of way that we can, you know, preserve and put some tree protection around some of those larger trees. It's sort of a joke when you see the developer come in after the fact, like, you know, what's going on at Golf Links Drive in Murray right now. You can see the massive tree stumps of the trees that were taken down. And in some case, development hasn't even occurred in that area. So those trees are now gone. And the ones that they're planting are this big. There's no way they will grow back to the tree canopy that we currently have. So if there is any way to put tree protection zone around the current trees that are on George, also at the north and the south end. And as well, the question being about where those fence lines are going, whether it's going to be above the hill going down to the park. Again, there's a huge zone of sort of trees, not big ones, but they are bigger than anything that will be planted. So if there's a way of doing a tree protection zone to sort of give some privacy to that park, give some privacy to those residents that are going to be moving in, and just sort of preserve that little sloping area. You only have to look at what's happened on Tyler to see that whole zone has been completely clear cut. And I think there's one row of trees they've left along that right of way. It's just completely changed the way that neighborhood looks. And it's happened time and time again. And I know we're not here about other things, but on Hillview, we've had several houses that have been sort of bought. The trees are clear cut. They haven't been developed, or they've been then resold, and those trees are now gone. Right. So if we're buying and we're speaking about a neighborhood, I think, you know, the tree canopy is something to consider, and we just can't replace those trees. So just a request. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Just get you to state your name. You have 5 minutes.
Hi there. My name's Amelia Forrest. My husband and I, we just bought a house on 88 George and moved in October 2nd. We love the neighborhood. We've got 2 young children, and we are in support of the 7 lot development. I think I agree that a traffic light at Wellington and George could be very beneficial. My only concern is we've been alarmed at how fast cars are on George Street, how quickly they bomb down. You know, oftentimes they're double the speed limit. We've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old who play on the driveway. Honestly, I don't feel safe having them within, 10 feet of the road, truly. I do believe if there was a traffic light at George and Wellington, that speed bumps would have to be a serious priority. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. I just get you to state your name and you have 5 minutes, sir.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ted Lax. I'm at 6 Hawthorne Lane. I just further what Tracy and the lady just that talked about, or two ahead of me, was about the depth of the lots and how much of the hill is affected. We used that hill. That was the best toboggan hill for kids under 8 years old for 20 years. Then the French school came in for a short period of time, put that fence in, blocked off access to that. Then all that shrub grew up on the hillside, and it was impossible to use. There's a little piece that you can access, but you have to go down the bottom. And anyway, it's a fantastic toboggan hill. I'd hate to see that part of it not be considered. I think there was, back to the issue of trees on that hill, there was very few trees before. We could fit some trees on there, but it was the use of the hill. Literally 50 kids would be toboggan at one time down there. So that's the only consideration I'd be looking for in terms of the setback or how far back those properties go. And I was glad to see that there is that 13-foot access still from George Street. That was a concern that was clarified tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Going once, going twice. Okay. Members of council, I close this public portion of the meeting. We do have a recommendation that the report number PDS 24-134 be received, and 2, that the comments presented at the statutory public planning meeting be addressed by Planning and Development Services in a report to a future committee of the whole meeting. Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Gilliland, second to Councillor Weiss. Comments or questions to the presentation from our staff and to our staff? Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. And thank you to the residents for providing your feedback. You have feet on the ground, so you know the neighborhood best. I'm happy to hear, for the most part, 7 units, seven lots on that area is acceptable. Just to give a little bit of perspective and maybe of what, if we didn't do what we did, what could have been. We had kind of a first right of refusal to purchase it, and the concept was sort of a bit of a change of thinking in terms of how most municipalities work. There's a piece of property that we could buy and convert it into parkland, and off you go. We had the concept of, let's try to somehow recoup some of the costs of that purchase so that there's less of an impact to the taxpayers. And as long as it's in line with the community, one of the mandates was it has to fit in, particularly with lot size of what's on that whole neighborhood and George Street. I certainly wouldn't be in favor of anything less than what's being proposed now. Had we not done that, it would have been on the open market. And as we all know, the current planning regime is to build as much as possible, notwithstanding what this council or the public may or may not have wanted. Something far more dense could have been there. I believe it's the best of both worlds. We managed to keep a green space, and we managed to be responsible in terms of spending tax dollars and try to recoup some of the cost of the purchase. While perhaps not part of this discussion, there has been discussions on, and I'm not sure when, maybe through you to Mr. Ramuno, one of the key things that I've heard, and that is also important and I share, is that how do we maintain those 7 lots so that no one comes and just buys them all and then comes back to us and makes them smaller or does something different. I believe the approach will be to service them and then sell them. And in that way, it'd be very difficult for anyone to purchase a service lot and then change it. So much infrastructure has gone into that in order to accomplish that. Mr. Maroon, is that the direction we're taking?
Is correct, Mr. Ramon?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. That's the process.
And through you, is that the best approach in order to preserve those 7 lots so that in the future, anyone potentially purchasing it will prohibit them from changing the lot sizes?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I think, in my opinion, that's the best process. I mean, the first step here is to finalize the zoning, and, following council's direction, we would then, zone the properties specifically for a minimum lot size. And the next step would be to actually service those lots, sever those lots, and then put them out to, for sale. And I think, as you mentioned, once we service it, the uptick in value for a service lot is obviously going to be a lot higher than, undeveloped land. So whoever's purchasing those are purchasing them for, a service lot to build a home. So I think the protection is there. Notwithstanding that, if someone, if a future owner ever comes back to try and make a change, which is probably unrealistic for a service lot of 50, 60, 70 foot of frontage, they would still need to come to this council to, if they were planning to rezone it. But again, once we service the lots and sever those individually, I mean, that's the best protection that we can afford the community, to ensure that those lots will be built, as we're discussing here tonight with detached homes.
Council?
Thank you. So, I mean, we did put some forethought in terms of maintaining that, as we know what could happen if we didn't do that. In terms of the easterly lot line and where that fence will lie, it's kind of on the north lot line of the sort of the third house south of George Street on Kennedy, is kind of where the back of the homes will be. Do we know on that hill where, through Mr. Mayor, where that back fence will be?
Certainly, through Mr. Mayor. So we had a survey done. So, and that's why we're showing those depths of about, just over 200 feet to align with the rear yards already existing on George Street. And I've walked the site a few months ago, and yes, the rear lots really are at the top of the slope.
Councilor?
Yep.
Thank you. And in terms of the development of the park, what's the process we'd be following, through you, Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Romano?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so our Parks Department will be coming to, reaching out to hold a community public engagement process for the design of that park sometime in the spring of 2025. So that'll be a separate process that our Parks Division will reach out to the community for a public information session.
Council?
And have we done any work in terms of any additional traffic that this may cause in the area?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, because again, in our opinion, and we've got traffic analysts within our department, for this number of lots, considering that the site, houses school from the 50s, the traffic volumes generating from, the half a dozen homes won't be significant. Obviously, good input from the publics this evening. We will certainly look at, the George Street Wellington intersection. We just completed our, master transportation plan. So we can follow up with respect to whether we have any plans for that intersection. Obviously, traffic calming, there's a separate process for that as well. But no, from a traffic standpoint, if we're looking at half a dozen, 6, 7 lots, the capacity of that road can certainly handle that amount of additional lots.
Councilor?
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think it's a win for the community in the town. I'm proud of the work that we all did to get it to this point. I'm happy to hear there isn't a lot of opposition. I respect the sentiment about affordable housing. I think it's about $520,000 or $30,000 in the town of Aurora, and unless it's a condominium housing, that's just not going to happen. And I'm not sure this is the appropriate place for that. It just doesn't fit into the fabric of that community. My view is those types of things, they should be around public transportation corridors, which is what we're trying to promote. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gilliland?
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Gallo. You asked a lot of questions and you made some clarity there of the process. I really appreciate that. Just a few follow-up questions. through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Rumuno. There has been some emails that have been circulating internally because I couldn't attend public planning tonight that were asking for us to consider an R1 zoning to be appropriate. And in your opinion, would that be an appropriate zoning for this area?
Mr. Rumuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the R1 zone is really one of our old historic zones, minimum 100-foot wide frontage. That zone does exist for sections of Kennedy Street, those larger lots. It's a different context. So no, in my opinion, the more appropriate zone in this area would be similar to what exists on George Street in Hillsview, which is the R3 minimum 50-foot frontages.
Counselor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we also had received several emails from people in a neighborhood requesting less density than the 7, as low as 3, 4, 5, 6, or so forth. And perhaps maybe there's also some confusion about the surrounding area and the conformity. And a lot of people thought that the 7 represented 50-foot minimum, but in fact, it actually represents 60-foot minimums. I guess my question is, by looking around the surrounding neighborhood and the conformity, I understand if you can make some clarity that Hawthorne, which is right directly across the street, has a special zoning of minimum 72-foot lot frontage. Is that correct?
Mr. Rumuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Hawthorne has a specific site-specific exception that permits a minimum 22 meters.
Counselor?
Appreciate that. And also shouldering on Kennedy, which Hawthorne would back onto, those properties are primarily in and around the 100-foot frontage. Is that correct?
Mr. Rumuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. They're larger on Kennedy.
Counselor?
Appreciate that. So just looking at the zoning that's currently across and adjacent and a surrounding area, obviously there's smaller lots that are mixed up north. I do feel some sentiment with some of the people in the community. I know that I've had several emails, at least a dozen. I would actually like to see at least 6, because that would reflect a minimum 70-foot lots frontage in that area. And that would, in my opinion, really conform with the neighborhood. That's where I would be advocating for. Considering right across the street within that block, it's a minimum 72-foot frontage. And behind, it's between 80 and 100. To me, I don't think that is offside. Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Rumuno. I know that we were thinking about making the numbers work, offset some of the costs for the purchasing of this land. Would those numbers work at 6 lots?
Mr. Rumuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So with respect to the number of lots, what we've shown in our report is just a conceptual plan just for reference purpose for discussion. We're in hands of council, obviously, and the community with respect to the appropriate number of lots. The R3, if we were to implement minimum 50 footers, the maximum number of lots would be 8. So we're really looking at between 6, 7, or 8 lots. So again, I think even if council wants to go with a 6 lots, approximately 70-foot frontage, I still think, in my opinion, those are still considered appropriate and consistent with the area, and it would be complementary with respect to the ultimate build form that would be constructed in the way of the final product being the homes on that street.
Counselor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just for clarity, because I know that one of the delegates did ask a question and received kind of a silent nod confirming the question about the trail, but I just wanted to say publicly that there is no intention to remove that trail access to the parkland on the north side of the property. Can you confirm that, Mr. Rumuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the existing trail is a 3-meter, 10-foot trail that exists at the very north end. Our plan here is what we've shown is to expand that to 20 feet. Add an extra 3 meters there, just to allow our Parks Department to get vehicles down that trail if they need to service the park. Yeah.
Counselor?
Thank you. And finally, just for clarity, because obviously there is some confusion about this property based on the fact we have parkland and we're talking about the home and the zoning. There was a question about the EP part of the property. Will the EP part of the property be affected at all by this severance that we're talking about tonight? And will it be decreased at all?
Mr. Rumuno?
through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I mean, the proposal to rezone the institutional frontage to residential doesn't impact the EP. That EP line, as Antonio mentioned, is not changing. That's the extent of the floodplain down at the very eastern limit, part of Lions Park. And the balance, we're proposing to be zoned open space for the future park design.
Counselor?
Thank you. And just one final question through Mr. Mayor. There was some concerns also with that trail, just following up on that, which is lined with a bit of a tree line. I'd like to assume that we have every intention of maintaining that tree line along the trail edge there as part of this consideration. Is that something that was always intentional?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, this is good discussion. It's something that we'll make a point of, and we'll take that back, obviously, to ensure that we try and protect as many trees as possible.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So just in conclusion, I'm really happy that we made this decision as council to take control of these lands, be able to offset the property in the back to allow for some much needed parkland and green space in the background. I look forward to the public consultation. How we end up dividing the property up top is yet to be determined, but this step right now, as we are approaching, is just allowing to go to committee whole so we can look further into how it's actually going to end up. I prefer to advocate for 6 because I do feel it does conform with the surrounding area adjacent and south and so forth. And I'm hoping that's where we're going to end up. But I am more than happy to move forward to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess along those lines, through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, we've heard about the homes on the west side, but the frontages of the homes on the east side of George Street to the north, based on the map you provided all the council, they range from 56 feet to about 65 feet. Is that correct?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. And I know Antonio's got more details, but yeah, that's the range.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you. As Councillor Gallo stated earlier, for myself, when the opportunity presented itself, it was a great way to address a much needed park within that community. But at the same time, we had to recognize the fact that, the property itself cost us about $11 million. The development of the park was going to cost $3 or $4 million. So all in, at the end of the day, it was going to be $15 million roughly to develop this property and make that investment. And so for myself, I did like the proposal to be able to try and not just make sure that whatever's built here is compatible with the neighborhood, but also try and ensure that we're recouping some degree of that investment so that we can minimize the costs. And that was the two reasons behind me being supportive of pursuing this property. And so I still like the idea of the 7 units as opposed to 6 that's being proposed by some. Through you to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, one of the residents talked about control measures to ensure that the development is compatible and suitable with the surrounding neighborhood, speaking to things like ensuring about front yard setback, trees, construction management. What can we do to ensure that what gets decided at council gets built?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So some good points from members of the public with respect to the development standards. So as part of the zoning, we will implement those development standards being height, front yard setback. So our typical front yard setback in the R3 and most zones is, I believe, Antonio, it's 6 meters or 20 feet. So we'll certainly take a look at perhaps increasing that to ensure that where those homes are built, they line up with the existing homes along George Street. So it's something that we can control through the zoning bylaw. With respect to tree planting, that's something that we can also deal with. Obviously, some trees may be, there aren't significant trees here, but along the road allowance, part of the servicing aspect here is we'll have to remove that apron, the lay-by parking, and reintroduce some sod. And so there'll be some street planting as well. And again, we will look at trying to preserve as many trees we can, especially towards the middle portion. So we can deal with the build form through the zoning bylaw standards, setbacks, height, etc. The architectural control is a little trickier nowadays because obviously the provincial legislation has eliminated that control from local municipalities and councils. But when we do move forward with the servicing of the lots in the future sale, we can have that discussion with our legal department about including certain standards, even architectural standards, construction management, timing within that future agreement of purchase and sale.
Thank you. And for the residents' information, if someone purchased the lot and wished to make changes for exceptions, for example, to the front yard setback or to any of the aspects that are contrary to the zoning, what would be the process? Would it be committee of adjustment? Would it be a public planning meeting? And would we be notifying the residents? Perhaps you can just sort of explain.
Mr. Romano?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor. So sure, if there's a future, like in any instance, if there's a future homeowner or builder who wants to come in with perhaps an exception to a front yard setback, side yard setback, or height, they would need an exception to the zoning bylaw, and that would be through a minor variance application to our committee of adjustment. And that is a full public process, and the surrounding neighbors would be notified of that process.
Great.
Councilor?
Thank you. And we've all seen a few emails in talking with some of the residents. One of the concerns is that somebody would be able to use this R3 zoning to build a townhouse or make some significant changes. Can you address that?
Mr. Romano?
Through Mr. Mayor, certainly no. The R3, as Antonio mentioned, the R3 zone specifically only permits detached housing with whatever standards we put in place, minimum of 50-foot lots. So townhomes would not be permitted or any other built form under that zoning bylaw without a rezoning amendment application.
Councilor?
Thank you. So I think it's fair to say that similar to the residents' concerns, we want to ensure that whatever gets built there is completely compatible and suitable for the neighborhood. It mirrors what there is now. They are single detached homes, that the zoning is appropriate, that the setbacks and some of the measures that have been put forth emulate what's in town already. Should anybody buy and put forward a change, then obviously they have a right to do so, but at the same time, it's a public process. You would be notified and be able to be involved in it, but it would be minor in nature. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to think that as we would just be doing the rezoning now, that if anybody wanted to go to the committee of adjustment, that the report from the planning department would be no, because we as a council have just decided what it should be. Would I be correct on that, Mr. Romano?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, again, it really depends on the extent of the variance. But again, what I will say is, moving forward with the size of these lots, I don't really foresee significant exceptions to those standards, because the standards that we will introduce will really be conducive to, larger homes. So again, depending on the variance, there is a process and staff. Planning staff write reports, so it's not to say that we always support variances that come forward, but we would have to review those as they come in. And Councilor Gardner, you're correct. We're going through a rezoning process here, so depending on what the exception they're looking for, staff may not support the variance. But again, we'd have to wait to see what anybody comes in with.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Romano. And as most of us know, that in an area very close to here, the area that I represent to the south, there have been a lot of applications to the Committee of Adjustment, and there have been a lot of changes that have been approved by the planning department. I would not like to see that in this area. The area behind the homes, the whole area behind the homes actually right now is environmental protection. And we are changing that to public open space. So I would like to know, first of all, what the drainage is going to look like, so that it really is environmental protection land. So I'd like to be assured that the drainage does not go into the EP land.
Mr. Romano?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, our next step would be, after the zoning, we've got a budget item in for the servicing design. So those are details that we'll certainly look at with respect to how the lots are serviced and where the storm drainage goes. But of course, the EP land is at floodplain limit at the very eastern boundary. So we will certainly address those concerns as part of the servicing design.
Counselor?
I'm looking at the agenda for tonight, and it has EP land going, including more than the floodplain, including the whole swath of land down the hill, it looks like to me.
Mr. Romero?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and maybe I'll turn it over to Antonio because you can put the proper maps up. So that from an OP standpoint, the EP, that is an anomaly designation in our new official plan. Those that portion, they are not environmental protection lands. They're really open space. We don't have an open space designation in our OP, but maybe if I can turn it over to Antonio, if you can put up the appropriate maps from our official plan, whether you've got the 2010 or the 2024 official plan.
Antonio, can I get that map up?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just further to that, we, as Mr. Ramuno mentioned, we don't have a public open space designation in our OP. So the environmental protection simply speaks to the allowance of private and public parks. And then our zoning would be the more restrictive mapping, which would remain the same. The EP boundary wouldn't be changed as part of this application. The EP would strictly protect the floodplain to the far east of the property, and the open space zone that's being proposed would ensure the public park that would be found at the rear of the lots.
Counselor?
Thank you. But the map in the agenda does designate that whole area EP.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and that's due. So our, as I stated, we don't have a public parkland designation in the OP. So the environmental protection encompasses public parks, private parks, trails, and open spaces. But if you can just go to the next slide. So this mapping is the accurate mapping for the environmental protection, which protects that floodplain found to the east of the property. So essentially, we would be aligning our OP with our zoning maps to ensure that residential, public, open space, and EP is protected on the property.
Counselor?
I think I'll just leave that. I'm not getting anywhere really with that. But the drainage, do we have, Mr. Reno, do we have an idea of the drainage plan at the moment? There must be one from George Street School.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, obviously the existing school and the play field to the east, I mean, drainage, I think was just dealt with, sheet drainage down the field. As we move forward, those lots that we create fronting on George Street will have to be serviced by water, sewer, and stormwater as well. As part of our park design, we'll also have to address servicing for the park and stormwater management. But again, the EP line is not changing, and will, as part of that servicing design of the lots and the future park, will ensure that that EP area is protected.
Thank you. I think that's what the community would want. With respect to, I thank you very much for widening that public pathway. It's about 10 feet now, and I believe you said you're widening it to 20. That will be very nice. Is there any way that you can have a place where the kids can put their sleighs and go tobogganing without being in somebody's actual backyard?
Mr. Romano?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, something we'll certainly take a look at, because then I walked the site and I think there's probably still room to do tobogganing from the future park, but we'll definitely take a look at that. And if it requires some slight adjustment with respect to the depth of those slots, when we pull back out at a future date, we'll address that.
Councilor?
Thank you. I see some smiles and I'm smiling as well, but we all know that kids don't get enough outdoor time and exercise and fresh air, and tobogganing was always something so easy and inexpensive to do. It would be a shame if we lose that opportunity here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As was already previously mentioned, when this opportunity was presented to council earlier this year, it was a great opportunity to build a park where, in the western part of Yonge, where in our parks master plan, we had too few. So it was a great opportunity. It was also prudent of us to sell that block, as Councillor Thompson has already mentioned, to be prudent with our reserve management. And we found that 7 lots was the best number of lots, based on our information. All the existing lots were between 50 and 75 foot frontage, and the lots that we're building now is between 51 and 71. So they're certainly comparable, and 7 would be, characteristic of the neighborhood. So we're very happy that majority of residents are in agreement. I just want to say one point in terms of what was brought up in some emails and personally asked of me by local residents was, why not just keep the George Street School, renovate it, and create a private school or any other facility? But there was asbestos potentially present and other hazardous items in there, and the cost of just refurbishing the building would have likely far exceeded just tearing it down and building something new. So just wanted to get that out there as to why the George Street School was not preserved. I don't think I have anything else to say, so thank you very much.
You. Any other comments, questions for the first time? Councillor Gardner, go ahead, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We did have a gentleman come to one of our previous meetings, and he had a question, actually an ask, that we could keep the gym from George Street Public School. And that's not happening, but I think it would be respectful to tell him why, if you have an answer.
Mr. Ramona, do you have an answer to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't, but in discussion with our Parks Department, I think the trying to salvage the school is just not feasible at this point. And plans are to, as Antonio mentioned, plans are to have that demolished in the new year.
I'm sorry, it's not. I think you're correct, but I'm not sure I heard it right, that it's not possible to salvage any of George Street School. It's not in good enough condition. We would have to put money into that, a lot of money. Thank you.
You. Councillor Gillan, second time.
Thank you. I just for clarity, I've heard some comments around the question, the council table about how we felt 7 lots. And I just, for clarity, through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Ramuno, it was proposed in this draft proposal tonight as 7 lots, just for sake of an example, that we are not making decisions on the number of lots tonight. Is that correct?
Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Councillor?
Thank you. I just really wanted to make that clear, that tonight what we're doing is voting to move this forward for the zoning changes. I hope to have a fulsome discussion about the number of lots and where we feel that will end up. But from what I gather from the information provided to me from planning, that anywhere from 6, 7, or 8 would be appropriate for myself. I prefer the 6, and that's what I will be advocating for. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ramuno, there was some comments about what's stopping us from having a single developer coming in and buying all parcels, how we decide they're divvied up to one vendor versus individually selling them off. And I think some of the reasoning for that is so there is some eclectic designs in between each home. So it's not one builder going in and they all look similar. And I think that's what we're all trying to avoid is maintain that individual charm and that character within each built form. Through Mr. Mayor and Mr. Ramuno, are we ensuring that we are controlling that type of built form so it's not just one mass plan by one person who wants to buy them all?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so, I mean, that'll be sort of the next step once we create those lots and decide to release those for sales. But there are other ways to control sort of the build form and architecture, even if it goes to one or multiple builders. That's through conditions within the offers of purchase and sale.
Councillor?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, I just wanted to ask a question. I know there was some residents across the street. I did meet with several, like I said, about a dozen, 15 residents in that immediate area that shared the same concerns about the conformity and so forth. So right across the street, just for context, because I know we have Hawthorne that has the exemption zoning of 72-foot lots, but there's also a house right directly across the street. And I believe that's about 85 square foot for us, or frontage, 85-foot frontage. Is that correct?
Antonio?
Through you, Mr. Chair, which lot specifically are you referring to?
Counselor?
In the corner. 104?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So the Hawthorne Lane has that special exception to have a minimum of 72 frontage lots. Anything greater than 72 would be permitted, but it is 100 and as the resident mentioned, 100 feet.
Perfect. Counselor? Thank you. I just wanted to put that out there. I do realize and understand that just north there are smaller lots. Looking at the map that was provided today by planning, so thank you very much. I do appreciate that. It did show the block of the exemption, and directly across on the other side was a school, and it all conformed in that area. Going further north, that conformed in a different way between the 55 to the 62, and then so forth. So I don't think it's an ask that is inappropriate. Having conversations with Mr. Rubino, and within the email that was sent, that 60 or 70 would be something that it's acceptable, and that would be something that I would be advocating for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Before I call the vote, just a few things for me. I too want to say thanks for all of you for coming out and all the emails that we got, but also thanks to this council for taking that step, as was mentioned, to buy this property to better protect the neighborhood from overdevelopment. I think that's what we're all trying to achieve. We're all trying to create compatibility while also balancing it with our duty to being fiscally responsible to the entire town and all our residents. And I think that's where we're going. I think what's being proposed so far is a good start. We're going to work on it. I'm confident that staff have not only heard our comments around the table, but I've heard from all of you, the residents, and we'll continue to work with all of us to develop the right plan that fits for all of us, that keeps that compatibility, but keeps us to be fiscally responsible to the town, and developing much needed parkland by the time we get to committee of the whole, and for us to make a final decision as we move through this process. I'm definitely looking forward to the park consultation in the first quarter of 2025. And I'm looking forward to seeing this area developed in a way that is appropriate and aligns with the neighboring communities. So with that being said, I will call the vote. That carries. Confirming bylaw. Someone want to move that? Councillor Weiss, seconded by Councillor Kim. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Before I call for adjournment, everyone please fill out one of those forms if you want to stay informed. Obviously, council will keep in touch with all of you as well. So will I. We'll make sure that you're informed. I'll come by and see you at some point. I want to see that red maple. And with that, I'll call for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Weiss, seconded by Councillor Gallo. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.